Why most people self-sabotage their progress. A few years ago, I had one of those moments that was frustrating because it was completely my fault. I had a clear goal, a clear plan, and enough information to make progress. But somehow, I kept getting in my own way. Not because I didn't know what to do, not because the opportunity wasn't good, but because every time progress started building, I would change something. I would get impatient, second guess the process, look for a faster route, and before long, I would be back at the beginning. At the time, I thought the problem was strategy. Looking back, the problem was me. And once I realized that, I started noticing something interesting. Most people don't fail because life stops them. Most people fail because they stop themselves. Not intentionally, not consciously, but through a pattern called self-sabotage. Most people don't even realize they are doing it because self-sabotage rarely looks like distraction. It usually looks like a reasonable decision. Let me explain. Imagine someone decides they are finally going to improve their finances. They create a budget, start saving, begin learning about investing. Maybe they start exploring an income producing asset. Everything is moving in the right direction. Then 3 weeks later, they reward themselves. Nothing wrong with that, except the reward costs more than they planned. The savings slow down. Progress stalls. The goal gets pushed further away, and suddenly they're wondering why nothing is changing. The problem wasn't the budget. The problem wasn't the opportunity. The problem was self-sabotage disguised as a harmless decision. Now, here's what's fascinating. The human brain is designed to seek comfort, not progress. Comfort. Progress usually requires uncertainty, effort, patience, delayed gratification. The brain hates all these things. So, whenever you're trying to improve your life, part of your brain is trying to pull you back toward familiarity, even if familiarity is keeping you stuck. That's why people often sabotage the very things they claim to want. Not because they are lazy, because their brain is protecting what's familiar, even when what's familiar isn't serving them. Think about Game of Thrones. One of the biggest reasons characters lost power wasn't because they lacked intelligence. Many of them were brilliant. The problem was emotional decisions, pride, impatience, ego. The moment emotions took control, the strategy collapsed. Financial life works exactly the same way. Now, most people don't lose because they are uninformed. They lose because emotions interrupt execution. Now, let's make this practical. Someone starts learning about investing. A few months pass. Progress feels slow. Instead of staying patient, they start looking for something faster, then something even faster, then something even faster. Before long, they have abandoned the original plan entirely. Nothing had time to work. And that's one of the most common forms of self-sabotage. Abandoning a good plan because it isn't producing immediate gratification. We live in a world possessed with speed, fast food, fast delivery, instant messaging, immediate entertainment. So naturally, people start expecting financial success to work exactly the same way. But wealth doesn't operate on the timeline of social media. It operates on the timeline of compounding. And compounding feels boring in the beginning. That's why so many people quit before it becomes powerful. Now, here's where things get more interesting. Self-sabotage doesn't always look negative. Sometimes it looks productive. Someone spends months researching, Watching videos, reading books, taking notes, learning constantly. It feels productive, but they are never actually implementing anything. They are consuming, not building. And eventually, consumption becomes another form of avoidance. Because learning feels safer than executing. Execution creates the possibility of failure. Learning doesn't. That's why some people stay in the preparation mode for years. They've mistaken motion for progress. But motion and progress are not the same thing. Watching another financial video isn't progress. Reading another book isn't progress. Progress happens when knowledge becomes action. And that's where most people sabotage themselves. Now think about Prison Break. Michael Scofield didn't escape because he had the perfect plan. No. He escaped because he executed the plan consistently under pressure. When things went wrong, when uncertainty appeared, when fear showed up, execution mattered more than information. The same principle applies financially because success isn't determined by what you know, it's determined by what you repeatedly do. And repetition is where self-sabotage usually enters. Why? Because repetition becomes boring. The excitement disappears, the novelty fades, and that's exactly when most people abandon the process. Not because the process stopped working, but because it stopped feeling exciting. This is one of the biggest financial traps professionals face, especially busy professionals. After a long work day, they don't just want progress, they want relief. They want something easy, something entertaining, something rewarding. And that's understandable. But those emotional decisions often create financial consequences. Overspending, inconsistent saving, abandoning side projects, jumping between opportunities, chasing trends, all because emotions are looking for immediate comfort. Now, here's the irony: the people who build the most progress are often the least emotional about the process. Not because they don't have emotions, because they don't let emotions make decisions. They rely on systems, and systems are powerful because they remove negotiation. You don't wake up every day deciding whether to save money. The system saves automatically. You don't constantly debate whether to work on your side income. The schedule already exists. You don't decide based on mood. You decide based on structure. And that's why systems outperform motivation almost every time. Motivation comes and goes. Systems remain. This is one of the biggest lessons behind the 3C method. Before you focus on building more income, you need to build better behavior because what you earn matters. But what you keep matters more, and what you multiply matters most. That's why financial education comes first, because without it, even increased income can become self-sabotage. You've probably seen it happen. Someone gets a raise, lifestyle expands, expenses increase, financial stress remains. More income, same problems, because the underlying behavior never changed. The income grew, the habits didn't. And eventually, the old patterns caught up. That's self-sabotage in action. Not dramatic, not obvious, just small decisions repeated over time. Now, here's the good news. The same principle works in reverse. Small positive decisions repeated over time also compound. Saving consistently, learning intentionally, building income producing assets, controlling spending, following systems, remaining patient. Those behaviors compound just like mistakes do. And eventually, the results become impossible to ignore. Which brings us back to the original question. Why do most people self-sabotage their own progress? Because progress requires becoming someone different. And becoming someone different feels uncomfortable. The old version of you wants immediate rewards. The new version of you understands delayed gratification. The old version reacts emotionally. The new version responds intentionally. The old version seeks comfort. The new version seeks growth. And every financial decision is really a vote for one of those versions. So if you've been feeling stuck, ask yourself something honest. Are external circumstances really stopping you? Or are there patterns quietly pulling you backward? Because once you identify those patterns, everything changes. You stop fighting the wrong battle. You stop blaming the strategy. You stop chasing shortcuts. And you start focusing on the one thing that matters most, your behavior. Because in the end, financial success isn't usually destroyed by one big mistake. It's usually delayed by hundreds of small acts of self-sabotage. And the moment you stop getting in your own way, progress becomes much easier. Not because life changed, because you did.